Why don't we start off with a guy that went from Broncos country, let's ride, to Steel City, let's build? So,
Or is it Steeler Nation, let's weld?
well, as I say it, let's build. So with Russell Wilson here, the question on the screen, Josh, will he resurrect his career in Pittsburgh? I am here to say this. Last year, the Steelers went 10-7 with Kenny Pickett, Mitch Trubisky, and Mason Rudolph at quarterback. And this year, they're probably going to go 10-7 with Russell Wilson as quarterback. I don't think this moves the needle at all. I think that they are still, at the very least, third in that division behind Cincinnati and Baltimore. You can make an argument they're a little bit above Cleveland. It just depends on who plays better at the most important position in sports, Deshaun Watson or Russell Wilson. I find it actually more interesting, and I know we'll get into this in a later topic, that Pittsburgh actually gave away one of Russell Wilson's weapons, and they signed a linebacker. So it speaks to the Steelers' culture of defense. Don't turn the ball over. We're going to try to win the game 6-3 if we possibly can. And so, listen, I think Russ will play well, but I think it's going to be a Denver situation where I think he's really on borrowed time. And as I said last week, right here on Championship Rings, if he did not end up as a Pittsburgh Steeler, I truly believe in my heart of hearts, Russell Wilson would have not been on an NFL roster, barring an injury and a team needing to trade for a quarterback to start this football season.
It makes sense. Like, you look around the landscape, there's not really anywhere else he could have gone where he would have been probably the definitive starter. But at the same time, Kenny Pickett was a first-round pick, so I don't think he'll give up his starting position that easily to Russell Wilson. Even though Russell is a Super Bowl champion, he should be a two-time Super Bowl champion if he hadn't thrown that interception. But I don't really want to talk about that, so we're just going to move on.
So, where I disagree with you on it is, I don't think Russell Wilson would have signed with the Steelers if he wasn't guaranteed the starter. And I think Pittsburgh is going to use this opportunity to, and we have not really seen a lot of teams do this, but it kind of makes sense from a defensive coach's perspective, because I think if Kenny Pickett was with an offensive coach, one or two things would happen. A, he would still be the starter and be flourishing in a better system. Or B, he would just be on another team. We just saw Sam Howell today get traded from the Commanders to Seattle. He got 1 year starting, and he's out the door. This would
Desmond Ridder got traded from Atlanta to Arizona.
Yep, and he had 1 year starting, and now Atlanta's got a new coach. He's out the door. So I think Pittsburgh is trying to get a little bit back in their investment for a first-round pick. I do think, we've seen a lot of whiffs lately on first-round talent. Trey Lance was obviously a whiff for San Francisco. New England just got barely a 6th-round pick for Mac Jones. Justin Fields right now, who we're about to talk to, doesn't really look like he has a market. So from that perspective, I think the Steelers trying to salvage whatever they get out of the first-round pick with Kenny Pickett. They like him. He obviously went to college in Pittsburgh. He knows the Steel organization. They share the same building. But I think when it all comes down to it, maybe there's a situation where Pickett sits for a year, learns under Russ, learns under Arthur Smith, who, as much as me and you have both made fun of the former Atlanta Falcons head coach, as the Tennessee Titans offensive coordinator, he was a very good offensive coordinator. He got the best out of Ryan Tannehill, and you can make the argument he got the best out of Desmond Ridder last year in Atlanta. His play calling sometimes was not great. He didn't get his playmakers involved, but he's not the worst coach in the world. And Russell Wilson, when he thrived, was early in his career with a great defensive-minded head coach and a run game. And he has a very similar situation now in Pittsburgh. And he's got nothing to lose because the Denver Broncos are paying him if he wanted to sit at home.
The other thing you're forgetting, though, is when he was in Seattle, yes, he had the great run game. Yes, he had the Legion of Boom. But he also had a complementary group of wide receivers. Doug Baldwin, Tyler Lockett. I'm trying to remember the one who caught like the Fail Mary.
Well, he had Freddie Swain as well. There was Jimmy Graham in there at tight end at times. Greg Olsen was there at times as a tight end. So he did have good weapons. He didn't have a great offensive line. The Steeler offensive line is not great, but it's better. He has a great tight end here with Pat Freiermuth.
Golden Tate was.
Golden Tate. Yeah, you're right. I did almost forget about that because he, bounced around with Detroit and the Giants and Philly, etc. But so you have that. You have George Pickens, who I think will have a very good year. Now he's clearly the number one wide receiver. I suspect they will go out in the draft and draft a receiver. Though if it's Pittsburgh, it's probably a day 2 or day 3 receiver, not a first-round pick. I would imagine they're going to spend that either on an offensive lineman or on defense like they always do. But yeah, Najee Harris, Jalen Ward, who I think is the better running back anyway. You got 2 backs, you got a receiver, you got a tight end. It's set up for Russ. The problem is he is in a division with Joe Burrow, who went healthy. I don't care what people say. I don't care about the fact that they lost Joe Mixon. We don't know what's going to happen yet with T. Higgins. I'll take Joe Burrow for my money over, 28 out of the 29 other starters in the National Football League. And then you got what Baltimore did, which we'll talk about later in the show.
Right. And, Cleveland made a addition to their offense. So.
Which we will also talk about, I'm sure, at a later date. But we go now from Russell Wilson and we head to Atlanta because Kirk Cousins is now a member of the Atlanta Falcons. Before we get to where this leaves Justin Fields, because we both had kind of thought that would be the ideal landing spot for him, I want to get your quick take, Josh, on Kirk Cousins to Atlanta.
This was really surprising to me. I mean, I didn't think he was going to go back to Minnesota. I felt like his time was up there because, yes, he got the Vikings into the playoffs, but he could never get them over the hump. The furthest Kirk Cousins got him was the divisional round in 2019 before they lost to the San Francisco 49ers. But it just felt like it was time for him to leave Minnesota, even though he still had Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson there. But I don't know why. I just wasn't expecting Atlanta. I thought before Russell Wilson, I thought Pittsburgh might be a reasonable destination for Kirk Cousins. Because similar to what you were talking about with Russell Wilson being like that teacher to Kenny Pickett, I thought Kirk Cousins could be a good teacher veteran for Kenny Pickett. I thought Tennessee might be an option. Same reason for Will Levis. So those were my 2 teams that I thought. Atlanta never really crossed my mind, to be honest with you.
I thought it was Minnesota or Atlanta. And as I had said previously, now as the rumors started coming out that he was heading to Atlanta, I thought more about it. I thought it made sense. Originally, I thought he was going to stay in Minnesota. But when you look at it from the Vikings' perspective, and this is one of the reasons why Minnesota went out and paid Sam Darnold $10 million and why they're not going to be interested in Justin Fields, is because if you pay Kirk Cousins with what he got in Atlanta, which is with incentives and all that, is going to be close to $50 million. If you do that, you're going to have to trade Justin Jefferson, which the Vikings are obviously not going to want to do. The Vikings are going to want to reset the quarterback clock. I could see them going after a J.J. McCarthy, a Bo Nix. I think Michael Penix is very much in play at that number 11 spot now for the Vikings, with Sam Darnold being that bridge quarterback that sort of plays for a year. Penix gets to learn in the system, and then you could still pay Justin Jefferson. You still have Jordan Addison on his rookie contract. You still have T.J. Hockenson, a very underrated offensive line, along with the addition of Aaron Jones, which we'll get to in the next segment. That Minnesota offense could be tasty. For Atlanta, Raheem Morris, we know that he is a defensive-minded coach, but what a lot of people don't know about Raheem Morris is He worked on the offensive side of the ball in the past. He's a former pass game coordinator. The offensive coordinator for Atlanta is also Zach Robinson. He came from the Sean McVay tree. Guess who else came from the Sean McVay tree? Kevin O'Connell, the head coach of the Minnesota Vikings.
Yep.
So because of that, I think the correlation with that scheme will fit Kirk Cousins. I think the fact that he is in a dome in Atlanta where he's used to playing a dome in Minnesota will help. It will help that the division is not as good as the NFC North. And I think Kirk Cousins sort of looked at not so much of what Tom Brady did when he went from New England to Tampa, because that roster was ready to win a Super Bowl. They just needed a quarterback. Baker Mayfield then replaced Tom Brady. I think Kirk moving to Atlanta shows that, hey, with these weapons, Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts, Drake London, and with that good defense they have, with Raheem leading the way, there is a chance that, Atlanta could be the Tampa of last year and potentially win the division as well as a playoff game.
I would still favor Tampa Bay in that division because they're bringing back Baker Mayfield. He's already familiar with that offense, so I would give Baker the edge in this.
I'll push back on that. Atlanta won 7 games last year with Desmond Ridder. They played Tampa close twice. They should have beat them in Tampa.
I agree with.
You don't think Kirk Cousins is worth 2 to 3 wins in that division and maybe even one more over Tampa to get them to win that division? Because I do.
Oh, I fully believe Kirk Cousins can lead the Falcons to a playoff spot. But I feel like because he's having to transition to another team, granted, I hear what you're saying about the Sean McVay tree and all that. It's still, he's going to have to learn a new playbook and all that. Baker Mayfield.
Not as much. The translation and everything, the language. Everybody runs the same system. Kyle Shanahan, Matt LaFleur, O'Connell, Stefanski, actually. All of these guys run the same system. It's this, it's not like going from, the air raid and Cliff Kingsbury to the West Coast. Or it's not like going from what Kellen Moore did to Mike McCarthy, which was the West Coast, which Dak Prescott thrived in, as we saw last year. Sometimes the transition can be easier than others. I'll also say this, and then I'll let you finish your point, is that Atlanta will have a third-place schedule next year, which will help, but Tampa will have a first-place schedule.
I hear you all on everything you just said. And at the same time, I do understand that Dave Canales is no longer in Tampa as he moved on to become, ironically, the Carolina Panthers head coach. But still, the fact that Baker is back there, they were able to bring back Mike Evans. Baker has already had a year with Tampa, so it's not like he's going to have to familiarize himself with the locker room. He already knows Mike Evans. He already knows the other offensive pieces and what they like to do. So for that, I would give Tampa the edge.
Let's talk about Justin Fields, because when we went into this process last week, we looked at teams like Atlanta. We looked at a team like Seattle. We looked at a team like Vegas. We looked at a team like Minnesota, and all those teams signed, bridge quarterbacks, and New England included Jacoby Brissett, Minnesota, Sam Darnold, Vegas, Gardner Minshew. Seattle today just went and got Sam Howell. And it really does feel like, and this is what I've said about Justin Fields, and again, I will say to the Raptors, wink, wink, Chicago Bears, this is why Justin Fields is not your franchise quarterback, and this is why you should and will draft Caleb Williams for all those Justin Fields defenders out there, because if somebody really thought Justin Fields was that guy, they would have went and got him over some of these bridge quarterbacks who are deciding to take a quarterback who is more based on potential in the draft. The Giants even went out and signed a guy like Drew Lock. The Jets got Tyrod Taylor as their backup quarterback. So with all of that quarterback movement, I personally think, and Josh, you may think this is a bad idea, you may disagree with me. If I'm Chicago,
No, don't say it.
At this point, I'm holding on to Justin Fields. I am still drafting Caleb Williams number 1 overall. I am not starting Justin Fields. I am waiting because I know it's either going to happen in week 1, week 2, week 3, the preseason. It happens to one team. We saw it this year 4 snaps in with the Jets and Aaron Rodgers. One of these teams is going to lose their starting quarterback for the duration or the entirety of the 2024 NFL season coming up. Once that happens, you don't want to bet a team would trade a second or a third for Justin Fields. Chicago's not want to get what New England got for Mac Jones, which was a 6th-round pick. New England just wanted to get Mac Jones out of the building because Mac Jones was a bad teammate. Justin Fields is not that, but clearly the market for him at this point is just not there.
Yeah, and I don't get it, but no, that is a absolute. I'm sorry, Brandon, but that is a horrible idea to keep both Caleb and Justin in the same building.
So you'd rather get rid of him for a 6th-round pick right now and get nothing on your return for an investment, because that's what he's going for.
At this point, yeah.
And this is why general managers lose their jobs. That is exactly why general managers lose their job, because they panic. They think, oh, we can't have a guy in the same room. He's going to hurt his feelings. You can't worry about feelings. This is a business.
Destroy Justin Fields' confidence.
No, it won't. Justin Fields already knows. He already knows if Caleb Williams gets drafted that he's going to be a backup in Chicago. And being a backup and sitting, like we just talked about with Kenny Pickett, may not be a bad idea.
Yeah.
Listen, one way or another, Justin Fields is going to be a backup. There's stories out there that my general manager, Howie Roseman, has called Chicago about Justin Fields backing up Jalen Hurts.
That would be a better situation than what you're talking about in Chicago.
How? It's the same situation. He's a backup.
Yes, but he's not dealing with the guy they drafted to replace him. When the Arizona Cardinals drafted Kyler Murray number 1 overall, they eventually traded Josh Rosen to the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, well, Josh Rosen was a guy that couldn't play, and everybody knew it.
Okay, but it's still... So
it's a different situation. Justin Fields can play. By the way, Mac Jones can't play. That's what the week is telling you, that Mac Jones can't play, that Mac Jones is a career backup.
I'm still surprised the Raiders didn't pull the trigger on Justin Fields. And I'll tell you why. Because, yes, the Colts got good quarterback play out of Gardner Minshew once Anthony Richardson went down. But Gardner Minshew is not a starter. Sure, he's better than what they have with Aiden O'Connell and Jimmy Garoppolo. I'll give you that. But still, he's a backup quarterback. Bring in Justin Fields, let him start, have Gardner Minshew be the backup, and if Justin Fields goes down, it's the same situation in Indianapolis. There you go.
So this is the way I see the Las Vegas Raiders, and we gave Antonio Pierce a lot of credit for what he did at the end of last season. But Antonio Pierce is also a defensive head coach, and I see Vegas doing the Gardner Minshew deal for 2 reasons. Number one, they can still, even though they have Gardner Minshew, even though they have Aiden O'Connell, they could still, if they wanted to, draft a quarterback in this year. If not, which I don't know which way they're leaning right now, but if they don't go that route, Vegas, they have good offensive talent. I really like their young tight end in Michael Myers. I like Jacoby Myers. I like Devontae Adams, obviously. You can build up that offensive line.
I do think it's a big loss for them not releasing Hunter Renfrow. I do think that's a big loss for them.
I don't know. He didn't have much success last year. He looked a little bit older. So I disagree. I think they have too many receivers at that point, and I think that the Raiders are basically looking at, hey, we can spend our money on defense, which Antonio Pierce is going to do because he's a defensive coach. We can try to play defense, limit Mahomes and Herbert as much as we possibly can, not be very good this year, and next year we can have our pick of the litter at the quarterback class because we don't feel like where we're drafting, we're going to get the best quarterback prospect possible, and we don't like Bo Nix as a franchise quarterback, or we don't like Michael Penix or J.J. McCarthy, et cetera, because as we've talked about on this show numerous times, historically in the NFL draft, this is what's going to happen. 6 quarterbacks are going to go in the first round this year. 2 are going to be absolute hits. 2 are going to be bridge guys to okay starters, and 2 are going to be absolute busts.
Yes, we don't know which quarterbacks those are going to be yet. If I had to make a prediction, I think Michael Penix is going to be one of the hits. I really do.
I don't. If I had to make a prediction right now, I think Penix will be a serviceable starter. I think the 2 hits will be Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels.
Ooh, I like Jaden Daniels. Where does Bo Nix fall into that?
For Bo Nix, and J.J. McCarthy, both. I think and Penix to a degree. I think it both depends on where they all land. I have J.J. McCarthy in my mind already a Denver Bronco.
Interesting.
Which I think would be a perfect fit for him. Bo Nix, I don't know. I mean, does Seattle make a play for him at this point?
I'm actually thinking Michael Penix to Seattle.
I've been thinking that too, but do they want to go with Sam Howell and Geno and then another quarterback? I don't know.
I mean, we saw how valuable the backup quarterback was last season.
Oh, what I say, the backup quarterback is the 3rd most valuable roster, spot behind quarterback and kicker. But outside of that, I mean, you can carry 2. I don't know about 3.